Welcome, dear listener, to Nightfall Royals, a sanctuary where history's grandest tales unfold beneath a velvet sky. Tonight, we journey softly through the life of Alexander the Great, a young king whose footsteps echoed across continents and whose dreams shaped the dawn of a new world. Let us settle together like old friends beneath the hush of twilight as we trace the quiet steps of a conqueror who sought not only empire but understanding. In this gentle storytelling, the vastness of ancient lands and the whispers of distant battles become lullabies, each moment inviting calm, reflection, and rest. Draw close, breathe deep, and let the soft glow of history's candle guide you into tranquil dreams. The year was 356 before the Common Era, and the summer air in Pella hung heavy with the scent of ripening figs. Beyond the palace walls, the warm breath of night rolled across the fields, stirring the dry grass and quiet waves. The Aegean lay far to the south, but its salt still clung faintly to the breeze, as if the sea itself had come to witness what the world was about to gain. Inside the royal palace, torchlight trembled against frescoed walls, casting long shadows of warriors and gods painted in ochre and gold. Servants moved softly along the corridors, their sandals whispering against the polished stone floors. The queen, Olympias, was in labor, and in the air there was a sense that more than a child was being born. That night the city slept fitfully. The far-off sanctuary of Artemis at Ephesus, the great temple, one of the wonders of the world, caught fire. Its flames licked high into the darkness, consuming cedar beams and marble columns, as though the goddess herself had abandoned her home to attend another birth. Centuries later, the historian Plutarch would write that the destruction of the temple was no accident of fate, that it was the god's way of marking the arrival of someone destined to set the world aflame. Philip II, king of Macedon, paced the outer court. The night had been restless for him. Earlier in the evening, a messenger had brought word of a victory. One of his generals had triumphed in a campaign far to the north. But the news, though welcome, seemed pale beside the unseen struggle within the palace walls. When the child came into the world, it was under the pale glow of a half-moon, its light spilling like silver water over the sleeping city. The midwives swaddled him and placed him into his mother's arms. Olympias looked down upon her son with an expression both fierce and tender. She was a woman of deep piety, prone to visions and dreams, and she had already convinced herself that her boy's life was bound to powers far beyond the mortal. Some would later say that Olympias claimed to have been visited in a dream by Zeus himself, that the god of thunder had come to her in the form of lightning, sealing her child's divine destiny. Whether born of truth or political theater, the story endured. Tilt, and in the slow-burning light of history, it added to the mystique of Alexander's birth. Philip, for his part, saw in the boy a promise of continuity, of strength. Macedon was a kingdom on the rise, its armies disciplined, its borders growing, its king ambitious. Yet Philip knew, as all rulers did, that fortune was fickle. A child was both an heir and a gamble. In the days that followed, omens seemed to gather like quiet sentinels around the infant prince. It was said that on the morning after Alexander's birth, His father received word that his horses had won at the Olympic Games, a sign to Macedonian minds that the boy would be unmatched in swiftness and strength. The palace gardens, a rare white falcon was seen resting in the shade, unafraid of human approach. Even the weather seemed to conspire in gentle favor, a season of unbroken sun, with rain only when the fields thirsted for it. Life in Pella moved to its measured rhythms. In the market square, merchants from Thessaly and beyond spread their goods upon wooden stalls, amphorae of wine, bolts of dyed cloth, jars of honey heavy with summer sweetness. Children ran between the columns, their laughter weaving with the call of doves that roosted in the eaves. And yet, even here, in the innocence of the city's daily life, there was a sense of something watchful. The court astrologers spoke in low tones about the alignment of the planets on the night of Alexander's birth. Card and Jupiter standing in rare accord. Card, Macedon's elders, men hardened by years of war, and politics, found themselves strangely moved when they looked upon the child. Alexander's cradle was carved from cedar and inlaid with ivory. It rested in a chamber whose walls were painted with scenes from the Iliad, warriors in bronze, ships upon a wine-dark sea, and the gods watching from the clouds. It was here, in this quiet room, that the boy began his first days. Wrapped in the soft hum of lullabies sung by women who had themselves been daughters of soldiers, Olympias kept a close guard over her son. She was a woman who understood the fragile line between favor and danger in a royal court. Though her marriage to Philip had been a political alliance, she wielded her influence with skill, and she intended for her child to grow in strength, both of body and of mind. Philip, ever the strategist, already imagined the boy's future, not merely as a successor, but as an instrument of Macedon's greater destiny. The kingdom had long looked eastward, toward the fractured Persian Empire, whose vast lands and wealth tempted every ambitious mind in Greece. But for now, Alexander was only an infant, his days marked by the rising and setting of the sun, by the steady warmth of his mother's arms, and by the soft night winds that carried the scent of faraway seas. In time, history would remember the boy as Alexander the Great, the conqueror who crossed deserts and mountains. He faced elephants in battle and stood in the courts of kings thousands of miles from his birthplace. But here, in these first weeks of life, the only worlds he knew were the shadows on his nursery walls, the rhythm of his mother's breathing, and the distant, endless song of the cicadas in the summer fields. And so the nights passed, slow and unhurried. The moon waxed and waned, the palace gardens bloomed and faded, and in the quiet spaces between, destiny grew, unseen but certain. And so, as the cradle rocked gently in the pale light of another night, fate whispered softly. The boy who would shape empires was sleeping, his dreams untouched by the weight of history. And here we too may rest, letting the night carry us onward to what the dawn will bring. The summers of Macedon were long and golden, stretching from the first blush of spring's almond blossoms to the last heavy clusters of autumn grapes. In those early years, Alexander grew in the quiet strength of Pallas's life. His world shaped by the rhythms of court, the tales of warriors, and the watchful eyes of his mother, Olympias. Olympias, with her dark hair braided like a crown, was more than a queen. She was a priestess of the cult of Dionysus, a keeper of rites older than the stones of palace walls. It was said she could charm serpents and summon visions. Whether such stories were born of truth or the need to magnify her influence, they wrapped her in an aura of mystery, one that the young Alexander would never quite step free from. His father, Philip II, was of a different nature, pragmatic, calculating. A man whose life had been shaped by the iron discipline of war. He understood the world as a chessboard of alliances and betrayals, and he meant for his son to learn the game as well as he had. But before the boy could inherit a kingdom, he would inherit an education. For this, Philip turned to one of the greatest minds in Greece, Aristotle. The philosopher arrived at Mysa, a sanctuary nestled between hills, where the air was fragrant with pine and the streams ran clear over smooth stones. It was here that Alexander and a select group of companions, boys who would later become his generals and confidants, studied beneath the shade of ancient plane trees. Aristotle's teachings were broad and deep. He spoke of ethics, politics, and the nature of the soul, of plants and animals, stars and winds. He guided the boys through Homer's epics, the verses of the Iliad recited under the warm light of afternoon. Alexander, it is said, kept a copy of Homer close to him for the rest of his life, reading by torchlight in distant lands. The prince's mind was sharp, quick to grasp the patterns of thought, but he was not content with books alone. He tested theories against the world itself, asking questions that stretched beyond the horizon. Why did rivers flow in one direction? Why did the sun feel hotter on one shore than another? Why did men fight and die for causes they barely understood? Physical training went hand in hand with philosophy. The boys wrestled in the courtyard, their bare feet kicking up dust, their shouts echoing against the stone walls. They hunted deer in the foothills, their bows bending with each release. They rode horses until their thighs ached, learning to feel the rhythm of the animal, as though it were an extension of their own body. It was during these years that Alexander tamed Bucephalus, the black horse with a star on his brow, so wild that no man could ride him. Philip had nearly given up on the beast when the boy stepped forward, no more than 12 years old. Alexander spoke softly, turning the horse toward the sun so that the shadows which had frightened him fell behind. Then, with quiet confidence, he mounted and rode. The court erupted in applause, but Philip's words were the true measure of the moment. My boy, you must find a kingdom equal to yourself. Macedon is too small for you. Alexander's circle of friends, Hephaestion, Ptolemy, Perdiccas, and others, grew close in these formative years. They shared lessons in hunts, feasts, and rivalries, and an unspoken belief that their destinies were intertwined. In the evenings, when the lessons were done and the sun had slipped behind the hills, Alexander would sit alone sometimes, looking east. There was something in him that reached beyond the land he knew. His mind carried the maps Aristotle had shown him, but his heart carried an older compass, one that pointed toward the unknown. It was in those moments, under the first stars of the night, that the young prince seemed most like his mother, touched by visions, restless with dreams. Olympia saw it too, and she nurtured it. She told him of Achilles, the hero who had chosen a short life of glory over a long life of quiet obscurity. She spoke of the gods' favor and wrath, of the threads of fate woven by the Moirai. And so, even before he took up a sword, Alexander understood that the measure of a man was not in years, but in the depth of his deeds. As the seasons turned, his youth gave way to the first shadows of manhood. His frame grew stronger, his gaze sharper, and in the quiet way of all true change, the boy began to disappear. In his place, the early shape of the man and the conqueror emerged. Macedon, too, was changing. Philip's campaigns had strengthened the kingdom, but they had also drawn the attention and suspicion of the Greek city-states to the south. The world beyond Pella's gates was stirring, and soon Alexander's education would leave the shade of Mysa for the harsher light of battlefields. But for now, the hills still held their green, the streams their clear song. Tall, the lessons of Aristotle still lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of pine and the sound of horses in the paddock. And in the quiet spaces of evening, the young prince still dreamed of horizons not yet reached. And here we may close our eyes as he does, letting the night draw its gentle veil over the hills of Mysa. Tomorrow will come with its summons, but tonight we rest in the lion's shadow where the future waits patiently for the dawn. The road from boyhood to command is seldom straight, and for Alexander, it was a path marked by moments of quiet observation and sudden tests. By his mid-teens, he was no longer merely the son of the king. He was a visible presence in the court, a figure whose bearing caught the eye, even among hardened warriors. Philip II, for all his ambition, was a shrewd reader of people. He knew that a prince could not be forged in the safety of marble halls alone. Macedon was not Athens, where rhetoric ruled. It was a kingdom where the weight of a sword mattered as much as the weight of words. And so Alexander began to appear beside his father at councils, his voice still young, but his mind sharpened by the years under Aristotle's tutelage. The court at Pella was a living theater, nobles arriving from distant provinces, emissaries bearing the gifts and grievances of allied tribes, and soldiers returning from campaigns with dust in their beards and tales on their tongues. Here, Alexander learned the delicate art of listening, of watching the small gestures that spoke louder than speeches. But the young prince's education was not limited to politics. Macedon's enemies were never far, and Philip made sure his son understood that the world beyond the palace walls was a place of shifting loyalties and sudden danger. By the age of 16, Alexander had been given his first true command, to govern as regent while his father campaigned in Thrace. It was an appointment, as much a test as an honor. Barely had Philip left the kingdom when a rebellion flared in the Medi, a Thracian tribe to the north. Without hesitation, Alexander gathered a force, marched to meet them, and crushed the uprising. In the place of their stronghold, he founded a new settlement, naming it Alexandropolis. the first of many cities that would bear his name. Such decisiveness did not go unnoticed. Among the older generals, there was a murmur of respect and, perhaps, a flicker of unease. Prince who could lead men in battle before his 17th year was a prince to be reckoned with. But if the battlefield proved his courage, the court tested his patience. Macedonian politics were a web of alliances and rivalries, many of them personal. Olympias, fiercely protective of her son, clashed with other factions, and Philip's later marriages stirred tensions that would one day erupt into crisis. Through it all, Alexander kept close to those he trusted most, companions bound to him by loyalty and shared trials. Profession, his equal in age, and perhaps the only one who could match his restless energy, was more than a friend. He was a confidant, the keeper of Alexander's private thoughts. It was during this time that the story of Bucephalus became legend. The great horse brought to Pella as a gift was deemed unrideable, shying at its own shadow. When the animal was about to be led away, Alexander stepped forward. He had seen what the others had not, that the stallion's fear lay in the shapes that danced before its eyes. Turning Bucephalus toward the sun, Alexander mounted and rode with such command that the court erupted in astonished applause. Philip's pride was unguarded. "My boy," he said, "seek a kingdom equal to yourself. Macedon is too small for you." In those words, Alexander heard not only approval, but an unspoken charge to look beyond the borders of their land. And so, the making of a prince continued, shaped by the contrasting influences of his parents. From Philip, the discipline of a soldier and the calculation of a statesman. From Olympias, a belief in destiny and the hunger for glory. It was a blend that would carry him farther than either could yet imagine. In the stillness of the palace gardens at dusk, Alexander would sometimes stand with a scroll in one hand and his gaze fixed eastward. The lessons of Aristotle filled his mind, the nature of justice, the measure of a good life, but so too did visions of rivers and mountains he had never seen. Even now, the seeds of his future campaigns were taking root. He understood that to lead was to carry both the sword and the story, the force that could command obedience and the vision that could inspire it. The years ahead would bring both triumph and fracture. Macedon's rise was not without cost. In the undercurrent of celebration, there was always the quiet tension of competing ambitions. But for the moment, the young prince's path seemed clear, lit by the twin lights of his father's trust and his own untested hunger. And so we leave him here at the threshold of his manhood, a prince with the weight of a kingdom at his back and the pull of the horizon in his heart. The night folds softly around the palace, and we too may rest, knowing that the dawn will bring the next turn in his journey. The summer air over Aija shimmered with the heat of celebration. Philip II of Macedon, now in the full height of his power, had summoned the kingdom's nobility and foreign dignitaries for the wedding of his daughter Cleopatra. It was a union meant to bind allies and display the reach of Macedonian influence, a day of music, gold-threaded garments, and the intoxicating scent of wine and laurel. Alexander, now 20, stood among the honored guests. His years under Aristotle and his first commands in the field had tempered him. Yet there was still something of youth in his stance, an energy just beneath the surface, like a bow drawn but not yet loosed. Relations with his father had at times been strained, particularly after Philip's marriage to Cleopatra Eurydice, union that seemed to threaten Alexander's place in the line of succession. But on this day, the air was meant for peace. Yet, in the bright glare of noon, fate often chooses its moment. Philip walked into the theater, unarmored, surrounded by guards whose attention was dulled by the safety of the occasion. The crowd stood, voices swelling in applause. From the shadows, a man stepped forward. Pausanias, one of the king's own bodyguards. Without a word, he drove his blade into Philip's side. The applause became a scream, and in moments, the king who had united Macedon lay dying upon the stone. Chaos erupted. Pausanias fled toward the city gates, but was cut down before he could escape. Whether he acted from personal grievance or at the whisper of greater conspiracies remains one of history's unanswered questions. The theater's bright banners fluttered in the breeze, untouched by the tragedy below. Alexander's world shifted in that instant. The crown had come to him not through years of steady succession, but through the violent, unplanned severing of the old order. The young man who had ridden Bucephalus into the sun now had to ride into the storm. Macedon's enemies, both within and beyond its borders, saw opportunity. Rival claimants, resentful nobles, and restless city-states all measured the new king, wondering if the son could stand where the father had stood. The danger was not only foreign. Even within the palace, the loyalties of generals and courtiers were uncertain. Alexander acted with the speed of one who understood that hesitation could be fatal. He secured the army's allegiance first, presenting himself not as an untested youth, but as a commander they already knew. The soldiers remembered his victories in Thrace, his presence beside Philip in campaigns, and the clarity of his orders. They pledged themselves to him, and with that, the foundation of his reign was set. But there were debts to fate to be paid. Rivals within the royal family, including potential heirs from Philip's other marriages, were swiftly neutralized. It was a brutal calculus, common to the politics of kingship, but it ensured that no immediate challenger could gather support. Olympias, fierce as ever, stood beside her son, wielding her influence with the precision of a blade. Beyond Macedon, the Greek city-states stirred. Thebes and Athens had long waited for the moment when Macedon's grip might loosen. Alexander moved south at once, his army marching with a speed that startled his opponents. In Corinth, he was recognized as leader of the Hellenic League, inheriting his father's command for the planned invasion of Persia. The young king stood among seasoned statesmen and warriors, and none could deny his authority. Yet, even in these early days, there was something in Alexander's demeanor that went beyond the mere consolidation of power. He carried himself as if the crown were not an end, but a beginning, as though this sudden kingship was the opening chapter of a larger design. In the quiet hours after the ceremonies, he would walk the ramparts of the palace at Pella, the torches casting gold against the night. Somewhere beyond those dark hills lay the Persian Empire, vast and fractured, a realm of cities older than his homeland, of kings draped in silk and gold. It was toward that a rise in his mind turned, even as his hands were busy securing his throne. The transition from prince to king is not a single step, but 1,000, each one measured, each one tested by eyes that look for weakness. Alexander took those steps quickly, decisively, but without haste. He moved as if he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. The crown, when it came, was heavy, but he wore it lightly, as though its weight was nothing compared to the burden of the ambition it carried. And here we leave him at the edge of this new chapter, a king born not in the slow unfolding of time, but in the sudden strike of fate. The night settles over Macedon, and in its stillness, the first quiet plans for an empire begin to form. The wind off the Aegean was sharp with the scent of salt in early spring. In the year 334 BCE, Alexander stood on the western shore of the Hellespont, the narrow strait that divided Europe from Asia. Before him lay the waters that had carried countless ships, traders from the east, Greek colonists, and long ago the armadas of Xerxes in his march against Greece. Now they would carry a different army, one moving in the opposite direction. The invasion of Persia had been Philip's dream, laid out in council chambers and sealed in the agreements of the Hellenic League. But it was Alexander who would bring that dream to life. The army at his back was a mosaic of Macedonians, Greeks, and allied forces, nearly 40,000 men, disciplined and ready, their armor catching the morning light like ripples of fire. Before boarding his ship, Alexander performed an act heavy with symbolism. He took a spear in hand, stepped onto Asian soil at the far shore, and thrust the weapon into the ground. It was a gesture both ceremonial and personal, a declaration that he claimed this land not as a traveler, but as a conqueror. From there, the march began. The first major trial came at the river Granicus. The Persian satraps, underestimating the young king, sought to meet him in open battle. The river was swollen with spring melt, its current swift. Alexander, against the counsel of some of his generals, ordered an immediate attack. He led the cavalry himself, plunging into the water, his armor gleaming and his white-plumed helmet bright against the spray. Arrows hissed through the air. The clash of metal and cries of men echoed across the valley. At the height of the battle, Alexander's life hung by a breath. A Persian noble, Spitharides, raised his axe for a killing blow, only to be struck down by Cletus the Black, one of Alexander's oldest companions. By day's end, the Persian force was scattered. The victory was more than military. It was psychological. The young king had shown that he would take risks his enemies could not match, and that his presence at the front would inspire his men to follow him anywhere. From Granicus, Alexander turned south along the coast, liberating Greek cities under Persian control. In Ephesus, he restored the temples and allowed the people to govern themselves, presenting himself not as a foreign overlord, but as a deliverer. In Miletus and Halicarnassus, resistance was fiercer, but the Macedonian siege engines ground down the defenders. The campaign's pace was relentless. Alexander moved as if time itself were an enemy to be outmaneuvered. Yet, even in the march, there were moments of stillness, nights when the army camped under clear skies. The stars mirrored in the dark waters, and the sounds of the sea folded into the murmurs of soldiers around their fires. The men spoke of their king with a mixture of awe and familiarity. He shared their dangers, ate their rations, and walked among their tents. But they also saw in him the distance of one whose thoughts reached far beyond the next battle. Persia was not a single victory to be won. It was a continent-spanning empire to be unmade and remade in his image. At Troy, Alexander made an offering at the tomb of Achilles, his childhood hero. Standing among the windswept ruins, he placed a wreath upon the grave and took up a shield said to have belonged to the warriors of the Trojan War. To him, the act was more than homage. It was a link across centuries, a silent oath that he too would live a life worthy of legend. As the army pressed deeper into Asia Minor, the road ahead curved toward the heart of Persian power. The great king, Darius III, was still far away, gathering his forces. But already, Alexander's arrival had sent ripples through the empire. Cities weighed whether to resist or submit. Satraps wondered if loyalty to Darius would prove more dangerous than surrender to the invader from Macedon. The Hellespont now lay behind them, its waters closed like a chapter in a book. Before them stretched the vast, unknown pages of Asia, each to be written in the language of war, diplomacy, and unyielding ambition. Here, as the campfires burn low on a foreign shore, we may let the tide carry us into sleep. For tomorrow, the march will begin again, and with it, the long road to the heart of an empire. The spring rains had softened the roads, leaving the air rich with the scent of earth and blooming wildflowers. Alexander's army moved steadily through the rolling hills of Phrygia, the land once ruled by the kings of legend. It was here, in the old capital of Gordium, that an object waited, not a fortress or an enemy, but a puzzle wrapped in prophecy. The city itself was quiet, its stone streets worn smooth by centuries of trade. Merchants closed their shutters as the Macedonian troops passed, though no violence marked their entry. For Alexander, this was not a place to be conquered by siege or sword. In the central square stood a weathered cart, its wood darkened with age, the yoke secured by a knot of bark and sinew so tightly wound it seemed part of the wood itself. The legend was known to every local. An oracle had foretold that whoever could untie the Gordian knot would become ruler of all Asia. Generations had tried and failed, the knot resisting even the most patient hands. Alexander approached it in the afternoon light, his companions watching with quiet curiosity. Some expected him to kneel and puzzle over the cords, to tug and twist until the knot gave way. Instead, he studied it for only a few moments. "What matter how it is undone?" he is said to have murmured, drawing his sword. With a single stroke, he cut through the knot. The cords fell away, the yoke split free. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some murmured approval at his decisiveness. Others whispered that the prophecy had been cheated. Alexander, however, saw no dishonor in the act. To him, the problem was solved, and the road ahead cleared. The manner of victory mattered less than its certainty. In later years, storytellers would shape this moment into metaphor, a symbol of bold solutions, of refusing to be bound by the limits others accept. But for Alexander, it was simply the choice of a man who did not intend to be delayed. From Gordium, the army pressed onward. The satrapies of Asia Minor were falling one by one, and news of the young king's victories at Granicus spread like wildfire. Darius III could no longer ignore the threat. He gathered an army said to be vast beyond counting, drawn from the many peoples and provinces of the Persian Empire, from the plains of Media to the shores of the Red Sea. The meeting place would be Issus, a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea. But before reaching that fateful field, Alexander's men passed through landscapes that seemed to speak of older ages, valleys scattered with the ruins of cities, long crumbled, where the wind moved through columns and broken gates, as if still carrying the voices of those who had lived there. At night, under the unfamiliar constellations of Asia's interior, the soldiers would gather around their fires. Some spoke of home, of vineyards and olive groves. Others spoke of the riches that lay ahead. Alexander moved among them, as always, as part of their world and yet apart, a figure whose eyes seemed fixed on something far beyond the circle of light. The knot had been cut, the prophecy claimed. Whether the gods themselves had taken notice was a question for poets. Alexander did not wait for their answer. Each day's march carried him closer to the heart of the Persian realm. In each city that opened its gates made its shadow stretch longer over the land. The Gordian knot was no longer a challenge on the road. It was now part of the story he carried with him, a story that would travel ahead of him into every court and camp, whispering of a king who wasted no time on what could be solved in a single stroke. And here, as the torches gutter in the warm night air of Gordium, we may rest. For in the quiet after such a decisive act, sleep comes easily, and the mind can dream of roads still unwritten. The year was 333 BCE. The wind that swept through the Gulf of Iskenderun carried the Thames of salt and the scent of winter rain. In the narrow plain of Issus, between the mountains and the sea, two armies faced one another, one young and lean from rapid marches, the other vast and glittering under the banners of the Persian great king, Darius III. Alexander's arrival at Issus was not by chance. Darius had sought to cut off the Macedonian supply lines to force a decisive engagement, yet the terrain favored the smaller army. The Persian host, stretched and compressed by the narrow ground, could not bring its full strength to bear. At dawn, Alexander placed his companion cavalry on the right, himself at their head, and ordered the phalanx forward. The clash was sudden and thunderous, spears meeting shields, the shouts of men drowned by the crush of bodies. Darius, in his high war chariot, looked across the field and saw the young king advancing toward him with unshaken speed. The Persian line wavered. In the chaos, Darius turned and fled, his chariot abandoned, his royal bow left behind. The sight broke his army's will. Thousands fell, thousands more were taken prisoner. Among those captured were Darius's mother, wife, and children. Alexander treated them with a courtesy that astonished even his own men, assuring them that they would be honored as members of a royal household, not spoils of war. In this, he displayed the blend of ruthlessness and magnanimity that marked his reign, the steel in battle, the grace in victory. From Issus, Alexander moved south, taking the Phoenician cities one by one. At Tyre, resistance was fierce, and the siege dragged on for 7 months. Alexander's engineers built a causeway across the sea to reach the island fortress, and when the walls fell, the city paid dearly. Gaza followed, its defense stubborn but doomed. By the time Alexander entered Egypt in 332 BCE, the Persians had been driven from the western edge of their empire. In Memphis, he was crowned pharaoh. In the desert, he journeyed to the oracle at Siwa, where the priest hailed him as the son of Zuzaman. Whether the words were carefully staged or truly divine, they served his purpose. His legend now carried divine sanction, but the heart of Persia still lay ahead. In 331 BCE, at Gaugamela, the two kings met again. Darius's army, vast beyond imagination, covered the plain like a sea. Alexander, undaunted, exploited a gap in the Persian lines and drove straight toward the great king. Once again, Darius fled. Once again, the empire's command fractured. The road to Persepolis lay open. The ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid kings sat amid terraces and palaces. Its great stairways, carved with the images of tribute bearers from every corner of the empire. When Alexander entered, he took the treasures, gold and silver, hoarded for generations, and sent them westward to Macedonia. It is said that in the spring of 330 BCE, the company of his companions and a foreign courtesan named Thais, Alexander allowed fire to be set to the palaces. Whether it was an act of drunken impulse, revenge for the Persian burning of Athens a century before, or calculated symbolism, no one can say with certainty. The flames rose into the night, their glow staining the mountains, their heat cracking the stone. The burning of Persepolis marked the symbolic end of the old Persian order. Yet for Alexander, it was not an ending, but a door opening to the east. Darius still lived, fleeing deeper into the empire, and the young king would not rest until his rival was overtaken. That night, long after the last ember fell to ash, the city lay silent, the columns blackened, the treasures gone, the carved reliefs now lit only by the cold light of the moon. And somewhere in that silence, Alexander's gaze was already turning toward the mountains of Media and the long roads beyond. And so, as the smoke drifts into the dark sky, we may close our eyes. For in the stillness after fire, the heart beats slowly, and the mind finds the quiet paths of sleep. The pursuit of Darius was no simple chase across open plains. The great king, stripped of his capitals and his treasures, had fled eastward into the satrapies of Media and beyond, seeking refuge among those still loyal to him. For Alexander, the road ahead led not into familiar landscapes, but into the high, cold passes of the Hindu Kush, mountains so vast and severe that they seemed to belong to another world entirely. It was the spring of 329 BCE. The snows were only beginning to loosen their grip on the peaks, but the air in the valleys still bit at the skin. Alexander's army, though hardened by years of campaigning, felt the strain of the climb. The narrow paths wound along sheer cliffs where a misstep could mean a fall into shadowed ravines. The pace was relentless. Supplies were carried on the backs of men and mules. The cold, stiffening leather and cloth. There was no hesitation in Alexander. He rode often at the front, pausing at high ridges to look east as though he could will the road to shorten. Along the way, villages offered a cautious welcome. Some submitted without resistance, providing food and guides. Others resisted, forcing the Macedonians to fight for every stretch of ground. In these highlands, the terrain was as much an enemy as any spear-wielding defender. Word reached Alexander that Darius was no longer a king in command, but a fugitive under the watch of his own satrap, Bessus, who had ambitions of his own. It was a dangerous development. The pursuit was now a race, not only against distance, but against betrayal. Alexander feared that if Darius were killed before being captured, the unifying symbol of Persian resistance would vanish into chaos, leaving him to subdue an empire in fragments. Crossing the highest pass, the army moved through snowfields where the wind roared like a living thing. The men wrapped their faces in cloth, their breath turning to ice. Horses slipped on frozen stones, mules balked at narrow ledges. But beyond the hardship lay the promise of Bactria, a land of rich rivers and walled cities, where the road to Darius might still be caught. In these mountains, Alexander's leadership took on a different cast. He shared in the cold and hunger, walking beside the men when the climb was too steep for horses, his armor hidden beneath heavy cloaks. Fires at night were small and hard-won, their warmth precious. In such moments, the king was less a figure of divine legend and more a companion in endurance. At last, the army descended into greener valleys. The air grew softer, the rivers broader, the villages more numerous. But the news they carried was grim. Bessus had seized Darius, holding him prisoner, his loyalty long since turned to ambition. The chase would continue into lands farther east than most Macedonians had ever dreamed. The Hindu Kush now lay behind them, its white summits fading into the western sky. For the men, the crossing had been a trial of body and spirit. For Alexander, it was another line crossed on the map of his destiny. Ahead lay Bactria, Sogdiana, and the final threads of the great king's flight. And so, as the mountains grow dim in the distance, we may rest beside a quiet river in the lowlands. For in the stillness, after great exertion, sleep comes not as escape, but as a reward. The summer sun burned high over the plains of Bactria when Alexander at last closed the gap between himself and the fugitive great king. Reports from scouts painted a grim picture. Darius III was no longer a ruler fleeing with dignity, but a prisoner bound in a wagon, guarded not by loyal generals, but by men who had once sworn oaths to him, now led by the satrap Bessus. Bessus had once commanded Persian forces at Gaugamela. Now he sought to cast himself as successor to the Achaemenid throne, styling himself Artaxerxes. To that end, he planned to offer Alexander no living Darius, lay a corpse, a symbol removed from the game, leaving him the sole claimant in the east. The chase quickened. Alexander's cavalry, lean from the long march, thundered across dry riverbeds and plains dotted with wild poppies. Every day brought them closer, the air thick with dust from the horses' hooves. It was near the village of Hecatompylos that the news came. Bessus, seeing Alexander's vanguard draw near, had struck his prisoner. Darius had been stabbed and abandoned by the roadside, left to bleed under the burning sky. When Alexander arrived, he found the great king still alive, barely. Counts differ on what passed between them in those final moments. Some say Darius thanked him for his treatment of the royal family. Others that Alexander promised him a proper burial and vengeance against his betrayers. Kella, whatever the truth, the Persian ruler died before the sun had set. True to his word, or to the needs of his image, Alexander ordered Darius's body to be carried with honor to Persepolis, to be laid among his ancestors. In doing so, he claimed more than just the spoils of conquest. He claimed the mantle of the Persian kings, presenting himself not as a foreign invader, but as a rightful heir to both Macedonian and Achaemenid legacies. Bessus fled eastward into Sogdiana, but his fate was sealed. Alexander's pursuit would stretch on through rivers and deserts until the satrap was captured, tried, and executed for regicide. Yet the true pivot in the great campaign had already come. With Darius's death, the Persian Empire was no longer an empire at all. It was Alexander's realm in name, if not yet in full control. The soldiers felt the weight of the moment. They had marched for years to unseat the great king, and now he lay still in a foreign land. There was no wild celebration, no festival, only the steady march eastward, for Alexander's gaze had already lifted beyond the horizon, toward lands few in his company could even name. That night, the campfires burned low. Some men spoke of returning home, their task complete. Others, knowing their king, understood there would be no turning back. And so, as the wind moves over the plain where one empire ended and another began, we too may rest. For the road is long, and the night is generous to those who seek its quiet embrace. Darius laid to rest in the Persian capitals under his seal. Alexander might have turned westward, back toward Macedonia, back toward the cities that had sent him forth. Yet the thought of returning without seeing what lay beyond the farthest maps seemed to him unthinkable. The Persian Empire, vast though it had been, was no longer the horizon of his ambition. Ahead lay Sogdiana and Bactria, lands of horse lords and fortified hill towns, where the wind carried the scent of steppes and deserts. Beyond them, India itself, a place described in Greek whispers as the edge of the earth, where the great river Indus poured into seas no Macedonian had seen. The march into these lands was unlike the campaigns of the West. Here, the terrain itself resisted conquest. Rivers were swift and unpredictable, their banks choked with reeds. Heat bore down from a sky that seemed wider and paler than that of Greece. In the villages, the people spoke in languages the interpreters barely knew. Resistance here was not grand armies, but sudden raids. Horsemen who struck from the dust and vanished into hills before the phalanx could form. Alexander answered with swift pursuit, riding at the front, his spear bright in the sun. He founded cities along the way: Alexandria, Eshet, the farthest each a marker of his claim, a seed of Greek order in distant soil. In Sogdiana, a fortress called the Rock of Sogdiana rose like a crown upon sheer cliffs. The defenders laughed when Alexander demanded surrender, saying he would need men with wings to take it. In reply, he sent climbers up the icy face by night, men trained in scaling cliffs from his campaigns in Asia Minor. At dawn, appeared above the walls, and the defenders, astonished, yielded. These victories carried him farther from the lands his men called home. The further east they marched, the stranger the constellations at night, the subtler the differences in the air, the more the soldiers whispered of limits. Yet Alexander's mind was fixed not on turning back, but on rivers yet unseen, mountains yet crossed, kings yet met. It was in these eastern marches that he met Roxana, the daughter of a local noble, whose beauty and spirit was said to match the sharpness of her mind. Their marriage bound the conqueror to the people of the region, and in the long years ahead, she would follow him even to the farthest edges of his campaigns. Beyond the Oxus River, the maps ended. Even the veterans of the Macedonian army felt the pull of the unknown. Some feared it. Others were drawn to it, but none doubted that their king would follow it wherever it led. That night, under a vault of unfamiliar stars, Alexander stood apart from the campfires. The wind off the steppe was cool, carrying the sound of distant wolves. Somewhere beyond that darkness lay India, and beyond India, the sea. To him, it was not the end of the world, but the next beginning. And so, as we stand on the threshold of lands unseen, we may close our eyes. For the night holds not only rest, but the dream of what waits beyond the horizon. The crossing into India was not marked by a single moment, but by a slow change in the world around them. The air grew heavy with warmth and scent, the sweetness of flowering trees, the dampness that clung to armor and cloth. Rivers ran broad and brown, carrying driftwood from unseen forests. The cries of birds were sharper, stranger than those of the western lands. For the Macedonians, it was a step beyond the reach of their histories. They marched east under a sun that seemed closer to the earth, its heat relentless, broken only by the shadows of banyan trees whose roots clutched the ground like great hands. Alexander's first challenge was not an enemy army, but the unity of his own. Many among the veterans believed their task complete with the fall of Darius. They had fought for years, crossed deserts and mountains, and now stood in a land that felt like the end of the world. Whispers of turning home grew louder. Yet Alexander spoke of new victories, of lands richer than Persia, of a glory that would outlast even Homer's verses. The first Indian rulers to meet him were cautious, summoned envoys with gifts of gold, ivory, and rare animals. Others mustered their warriors in defiance. The most famous of these encounters would come with King Porus, whose lands lay beyond the Hydaspes River. But before that meeting, Alexander's forces moved through kingdoms whose names were strange to Greek tongues, securing alliances and clearing resistance. The monsoon rains came, and with them a new hardship. Roads turned to rivers of mud, armor rusted, if not cleaned, daily. Bows lost their strength in the damp, yet Alexander's pace did not falter. He listened to local guides, learning of the lands, customs, and the tactics of its rulers. When they reached the banks of the Hydaspes, the river was swollen, its far shore lined with Porus's army, tall men in bright armor, and at their center, the great war elephants. For the Macedonians, the sight was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. No phalanx drill in Macedon had ever accounted for beasts that could crush men underfoot. Alexander, as always, sought not the obvious path, but the unexpected. In the days that followed, he staged feints, moving his forces up and down the river until Porus grew accustomed to the pattern. Then, on a stormy night, he crossed at a point miles upstream, bringing a select force to strike at dawn. The Battle of the Hydaspes was unlike any the Macedonians had fought. Rain fell in sheets, turning the ground to mire. The elephants charged, their tusks capped with iron, their trumpeting drowning the shouts of men. Yet Alexander's cavalry maneuvered with precision, striking the flanks, while his infantry held firm against the beast's weight. When the battle ended, Porus stood wounded, but unbowed before Alexander. Asked how he wished to be treated, the Indian king replied, "As a king." "It is," said Alexander, moved by his courage, restored his lands, and made him an ally. For the Macedonians, this was proof that even at the edge of the world, honor could be found in unexpected places. For Alexander, it was another step into lands whose riches and mysteries drew him ever onward. And so, with the rain still falling on the quiet fields, we may lay our heads down. For the night beyond the battle is deep, and the dreams that come after great trials are the sweetest of all. The triumphs in India had brought glory, yet also weariness. The soldiers, once eager for conquest, now spoke openly of the journey's cost. Years of relentless marching, the endless battle, the unfamiliar lands and strange skies. Their hearts longed for home, for the familiar hills of Macedon and the quiet of Athenian nights. At the banks of the Hyphasis River, the easternmost point of their advance, Alexander convened his commanders. The murmurs of refusal grew stronger among the men, No longer could they be swayed by tales of distant kingdoms or promises of everlasting fame. They were tired, their spirits frayed by the unending march through unknown worlds. With a heavy heart, Alexander agreed to turn back. The path home would be no easy return. They faced deserts that burned beneath the cruel sun, rivers swollen with monsoon rains, and lands where even the Macedonian tongue could not ease the tension between conqueror and conquered. The retreat was arduous. Heat and disease took their toll. The Jet-Rosian Desert, a vast and merciless expanse, tested the army's endurance as no mountain or battlefield had before. Water was scarce, and many fell silent beneath the unforgiving sun. Alexander himself rode with a quiet resolve, sharing in the hardships his men endured. Yet, amid the hardship, the king sought to build bridges, blending Greek customs with those of the lands he had conquered. He married Roxana in a ceremony that bound east and west, symbolizing a vision beyond mere conquest toward a synthesis of cultures. Cities founded along the return route served as lasting monuments to this vision. Places where Greek art and Persian tradition might meet under the same sky. Despite the toll, Alexander's spirit remained undimmed. The road home was lined not only with the scars of battle, but also with the promise of renewal. For in the quiet moments beside campfires, as stars wheel overhead, the stories told spoke not only of war, but of hope, unity, and the fragile beauty of a world brought together by a single, restless man. As we journey from distant deserts toward the familiar earth, let us rest now, for the long road is behind us, and the quiet night ahead holds the promise of peace. Alexander's return to Babylon was not the triumphant homecoming many might have imagined. Instead, it was marked by a slow gathering of shadows, the weight of empire pressing heavily on his shoulders, and a body worn by years of battle and hardship. Babylon, once the jewel of the ancient world, welcomed him with open gates and cautious hope. The city's grand temples, gardens, and palaces stood as monuments not only to its own glory, but to the vast empire now held in Alexander's hands. Yet, even in this grandeur, the king seemed distant. His thoughts drifting beyond the stone walls, two distant frontiers still unexplored. The administration of such an empire required more than a sword. Alexander sought to govern through respect and integration, encouraging his generals to marry local nobility, to adopt customs, and to rule with a degree of tolerance unusual for the time. His vision was not merely conquest, but fusion, a melding of Greek and Persian, Macedonian and Indian into a new world order. Yet the burdens of power were relentless. Political intrigue grew like a shadow at the edges of his court. His health, weakened by wounds, fever, and exhaustion, declined steadily. Stories speak of nights spent in restless fever, attended by physicians who could offer little beyond care and prayer. In the midst of this, Alexander made plans for further campaigns, for the founding of more cities, for the securing of his legacy. But fate, ever unpredictable, would intervene. In 323 BCE, at the age of just 32, Alexander fell ill. His death in Babylon shocked the ancient world, a sudden end to a life that had burned as fiercely as a comet across the sky. The exact cause remains uncertain. Some suggest malaria or typhoid, others poison. The truth, perhaps, lies forever veiled in the mists of history. His passing left a void that no one could fill. His generals, once united by loyalty, soon fractured into rival factions. The empire he had forged began to unravel, its territories divided in the wars of the successors. Yet Alexander's vision endured. In the cities he founded, in the cultures he bridged, and in the legends whispered beneath the stars. And so, as the final breath of a great man fades into the quiet night, we too may rest. For in the stillness of history, his story remains a gentle flame, a light to guide our dreams. Alexander the Great's death did not close the book on his story. Rather, it opened a new chapter in the history of the world, a chapter written not only in the victories of arms, but in the enduring echoes of culture, language, and vision. The empire he carved from the earth, though fractured by his successors' struggles, planted seeds that would grow for centuries. The Hellenistic age that followed was a testament to his ambition, a melding of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian worlds into a rich tapestry of art, science, and philosophy. Cities like Alexandria in Egypt became beacons of knowledge, where scholars gathered beneath great libraries to study stars, medicine, and mathematics. Trade routes stretched farther than ever before, carrying not only goods but ideas and stories between continents. Alexander's vision of unity, though imperfect and unfinished, invited a reconsideration of what empire could mean. It was not only dominion by force, but the possibility of coexistence and synthesis. A world where diverse peoples shared language, customs, and dreams beneath a common sky. Yet with legacy comes the weight of interpretation. Over centuries, Alexander has been many things: a hero, a conqueror, a symbol of imperial ambition, and a figure of endless fascination. His story has been told and retold, sometimes glorified, sometimes questioned, but always remembered with a mixture of awe and reflection. Tonight, as we close our eyes beneath the same stars that once shone over his campaigns, we may think of him not just as a man who sought to rule the world, but as one who dared to dream beyond the limits of his time. And so, with the quiet turning of the pages of history, let us rest gently, for the night holds the soft whisper of legacy, and in dreams we find the bridges that connect past to present. The dust of Alexander's campaigns settled slowly, giving way to an era both familiar and new. The Hellenistic age blossomed, born from the convergence of cultures, where the echoes of Macedonian conquest mingled with the traditions of Persia, Egypt, and India. In cities founded by Alexander and his successors, vibrant Alexandria in Egypt, Antioch in Syria, and others. A new world unfolded. Markets brimmed with spices from the east. Artisans shaped sculptures, blending Greek ideals with local motifs. And philosophers debated beneath colonnades adorned with Eastern designs. This was an age of restless inquiry. Scholars like Euclid crafted the foundations of geometry, while astronomers like Hipparchus mapped the heavens with new precision. Medicine advanced through the blending of Greek theories and Egyptian remedies. The Library of Alexandria became a beacon for all who sought knowledge, sanctuary where the night held the promise of discovery. Politically, the vast empire fractured into kingdoms ruled by Alexander's generals, the Seleucids, Ptolemies, and Antigonids, each a world unto itself, yet bound by a shared legacy. Their courts blended Macedonian customs with those of the lands they governed, fostering a cosmopolitan spirit rare in ancient times. Yet this new dawn was not without shadows. The successors often struggled for power, and old rivalries flared anew. The borders between kingdoms were guarded by armies as fierce as those that once marched with Alexander himself. Still, the promise of a connected world endured, a bridge between East and West, forged in the restless spirit of the conqueror. As we reflect on this age, we see not only the triumph of empire, but the quiet resilience of culture, how art, thought, and human connection rise from the tides of history, offering light in the gentle dark of night. And so, as the stars wheel above the cities that never sleep, we may rest in their light. For in every ending is a beginning, and in every shadow a dawn. Beyond the battles and the vast territories, it is the spirit of Alexander that invites our quiet contemplation tonight. What drove this young king to pursue horizons others dared not dream of? What thoughts stirred beneath his helmet in the stillness between marches and battles? Alexander was not merely a warrior, he was a student of the world, taught by the philosopher Aristotle. He was steeped in the knowledge of Greek history, science, and poetry. He carried with him copies of Homer's epics, often sleeping with the Iliad close at hand, constant reminder of glory and the fleeting nature of life. His ambition was tempered by a restless curiosity and a desire to unify diverse peoples under a common vision. Yet, this same ambition exacted a closer tension between his role as a conqueror and his yearning to be more than a mere king. In moments of solitude, Alexander pondered the fragility of power and the vastness of the world. He sought counsel from sages and oracles, listening to voices both earthly and divine. Hazy decisions reflected a mind balance between boldness and reflection. The loyalty of his companions, many of whom had grown with him since youth, was forged in shared hardship and shared dreams. Yet, even among them, doubts whispered in the night. Was this pursuit of endless conquest the path to immortality, or a flame destined to burn too brightly, then fade? His personal rituals, the nighttime readings, the conversations under starlit skies, the moments spent gazing eastward reveal a man who embraced not only the sword, but the weight of destiny itself. And so, As the quiet breath of night settles around us, we may find solace in the complexity of a mind that reached for the infinite, reminding us that even the greatest among us are shaped by the same dreams and doubts that touch us all. As Alexander's army swept across continents, he carried with him not only his ambitions, but also the seeds of civilization, the cities he founded that would endure long after his footsteps faded. Each city was a beacon, a testament to the unity of worlds, a place where East and West might meet beneath shared skies. Alexandria in Egypt, perhaps the most famous, grew into a jewel of culture and learning. Its great library, a sanctuary of scrolls and knowledge, drew scholars from every corner of the known world. The city's harbor welcomed ships laden with spices, papyrus, and treasures, weaving a network of commerce and culture. But Alexandria was only one among many. Across Persia, Babylon, and into the heart of Asia, settlements bore the Macedonian mark, cities designed with broad streets, temples to Greek gods, and marketplaces humming with languages from many lands. These cities served as administrative centers, military garrisons, and homes for settlers from diverse backgrounds. Through these urban foundations, Alexander's vision extended beyond conquest. They were bridges between cultures, incubators of new art forms, religious syncretism, and philosophies. In these spaces, the blending of Greek architectural styles with local traditions created something entirely new. A Hellenistic culture, alive with possibility. Yet, these cities also bore the challenges of empire, tensions between native populations and settlers, the complexities of governance, and the constant vigilance required to maintain order in far-flung territories. Still, their endurance through centuries reminds us that even amid the march of armies and the sweep of history, human communities find ways to grow, adapt, and dream. And so, as twilight deepens around us, we rest in the knowledge that cities, like stories, live on, gentle lights in the quiet dark. In the quiet moments between battles and banquets, Alexander's thoughts turned often to a question that has long echoed through the corridors of history. What is the true nature of empire? For Alexander, empire was not merely about dominion or the display of power. It was a vision, one of unity amid diversity, a realm where Greek and Persian, Macedonian and Indian might not only coexist, but enrich one another. His efforts to adopt Persian customs, encourage marriages between his soldiers and local women, and to respect the traditions of conquered peoples, spoke of a ruler who sought to weave a new social fabric. This was an empire built not only on swords, but on shared ideas and mutual respect. Yet, this vision was fragile. Resistance simmered beneath the surface, both from Macedonians wary of foreign influence, and from native populations reluctant to accept foreign rule. These tensions required not only military skill, but a deep understanding of human nature and culture. Philosophers of the time debated the legitimacy of conquest and the ethics of rulership, themes that would resonate through the centuries. Alexander's empire, though short-lived, raised timeless questions about identity, power, prestige, and the possibility of harmony in a fragmented world. As we reflect on these ideas in the quiet of night, we may find a gentle lesson that the truest empires are those built not on fear, but on the delicate threads of understanding and respect. And now, as darkness enfolds us, let us rest in this thought, that peace, like empire, is a work of patience and care. Alexander's life, though well documented, is also a tapestry woven with mysteries and legend stories told beside fires and in royal courts, sprued beneath stars and passed down through generations. These tales add a gentle shimmer to the man's history, softening the edges of fact with the glow of myth. Some speak of his divine origins, claiming he was the son of Zeus or a mortal touched by the gods. Others tell of his horse, Bucephalus, a creature of such spirit and loyalty that their bond became legendary, a symbol of courage and trust that echoed across centuries. His sudden death in Babylon invited countless theories: poison, illness, or perhaps a curse. The truth remains elusive, veiled like the night's quiet mystery. This uncertainty, rather than diminishing his legacy, invites reflection on the fragile nature of life and the stories we tell to make sense of it. Over time, Alexander's story inspired poets and painters, philosophers, and rulers' edge, interpreting his journey through the lens of their own dreams and fears. He became a symbol of ambition and greatness, but also of the cost of relentless pursuit. As we lay down to rest, these legends remind us that history is not only a record of events, but a living conversation between past and present. The quiet myths of Alexander, like soft lanterns, illuminate the path through the dark. And so, with the night deepening around us, we close our eyes in gentle wonder, cradled by stories that linger like whispered dreams. As our journey through the life and legacy of Alexander the Great draws to a close, let us settle softly into the quiet embrace of night. The stories of his youth, his conquests, his vision, and his enduring influence have carried us across time and place, like a slow river winding beneath a star-filled sky. Alexander was a man shaped by his era, yet transcending each restless spirit, who dreamed of unity amid diversity, who bridged continents with ambition and curiosity. His life reminds us of the fragile balance between power and wisdom, between the desire to conquer and the need to understand. Tonight, as you lay your head down and the world quiets around you, may the gentle echoes of his story lull you into peaceful sleep. Imagine the soft flicker of candlelight in ancient halls, the rustle of pages in great libraries, the whispered prayers of distant lands joined in silent night. Let us carry forward the lesson of history's tender shadows, that every end holds a new beginning, that every story told softly holds the power to calm, to inspire, and to connect. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams be filled with stars and the gentle wisdom of ages past.